Welcome back everybody to part 3 of our Unity Space Invaders tutorial series. In the previous videos, we set up movement for the player and the aliens. Now, let's give our players the ability to fend off these alien attackers. So, when you're ready, grab your plasma rifles, let's crack on. First, a kind reminder that you can download this project from the link in the description below and follow along. When everyone is ready, let's talk about our projectile setup. So, in the prefabs folder, you'll see that we have an alien laser and a laser. Double click and open up the laser. This green laser is the one that our players will shoot. We have added a tag laser and we've also created a laser layer. I'll explain why shortly. We want to add a rigid body 2D and I've froze the rotation on the Z-axis. We don't want our projectiles spinning out of control. And we want this to collide with the aliens, so we've added a box collider 2D with is trigger checked. Speaking of collisions, you might notice that the collider is a little bit too big for the laser. This is okay, but if you would like to change it, you can edit the collider by clicking this button here, and you can drag the edges to better fit the laser if you wish. Now, let's head over to the alien laser, and you'll see that we have exactly the same rigid body 2D, the box collider 2D as a trigger, but we have changed the tag and the layer. For the tag, we've put enemy laser, and for the layer, we've put alien laser. So, why have I done this? When we instantiate these lasers, we'll do so from the body of the tank and the aliens themselves. Of course, they also have colliders. That's going to cause some problems. So, I'd like to show you something very useful. If you go to Edit, go to your project settings, you'll see something in Physics 2D called the Layer Collision Matrix. This allows us to control which layers can collide with each other. To do that, we simply uncheck the box with the layers we don't want to collide with each other. So, we don't want the alien laser to collide with the alien, so we'll uncheck that box. And we don't want the player to collide with the laser, so we'll uncheck that box like so. I've already set this up for you, but in future projects, feel free to utilize this. It can be very, very useful. When our projectiles collide with each other or another game object, we want there to be a cool explosion effect. So, in the prefabs folder, you'll see an object called explosion. Open it up, and you'll see that it has an animator because it has a simple little exploding animation like so. It's very, very quick. It lasts for about 0.3 of a second. So, once the animation has stopped playing, we want to destroy this object in the scene. In order to do that, we can simply add, in your scripts, the Don't Destroy Over Time script. And this is very, very simple. It is as follows. We have a serialized float timer when that timer has been met. So, let's go ahead and add that to the explosion object. Double click, and where you see Add Component, just type in the name of the script, and you can add it just like so. Like I said, my explosion is very fast. It is 0.3 of a second, so I'll punch in that value right there, just like so. That's all we need for the Destroy Over Time script. Next, let's have a look at creating our projectile script. In the scripts folder, create and open up your projectile script. Okay, so first things first. We have two individual projectiles, and they're both going to be sharing this projectile script, rather than create two individual scripts for each object. Now, why are we doing that? Well, the player laser will be traveling up. The alien lasers will be traveling down. And if we use a public vector 2 called move direction, we can manually input which direction we want the projectile to travel in the inspector. For example, for the laser, we'll put 1, meaning it will travel up. For the alien laser, we'll put -1, meaning it will travel down on the y-axis. We also want to give our lasers a speed, so we'll have the public float of speed. Now, below here, we have something specific to C#. We're going to use a public system.action, which we will call destroyed. This is going to help determine whether or not we can shoot our laser, because in Space Invaders, we can only shoot one projectile and we cannot shoot again until that projectile has been destroyed. So this action is an event that will be invoked, called, when the laser has been destroyed. This means that other scripts can listen out for this event and determine what action they want to implement. And of course, we also want to instantiate our public game object, explosion. Now we have the variables set, let's punch in the movement in update. So, just like the player, we will say transform.translate. We want to move by the value that is our move direction on the vector 2, multiplied by speed, multiplied by times.delta time. Next, let's move on to the on-trigger enter 2D. What we're going to punch in here is that when the laser hits any game object in the scene, we want to destroy it, instantiate that explosion, and call upon that destroyed action. Now, as this script is going to be shared with the alien laser and the player laser, there's going to be lots of lasers active in the scene at one time. In order to make sure that the action is not being conflicted with any other callbacks, we're going to start with an if statement. And we'll say if the destroyed action is not null, meaning it's not currently being used, then we won't invoke the action because we only want the player to use it, not the aliens. Then underneath, we'll instantiate our explosion object at the transform position and the transform rotation of the laser. And ultimately, we want to destroy that laser game object as well. Great, that's all we need for the projectile script. Hit save, and let's head back into the player controller script. Now, let's give our players the ability to shoot. In the variables, let's punch in two more. The first will be a public projectile called laser, referring of course to the projectile script. And we want a public bool of reloading. This is going to control when we can and cannot shoot. With those set, let's go down and create a void shoot method. Here in the shoot method, we're going to say that if we are not reloading, then we are able to shoot. So we'll open up with an if statement saying if we're not reloading, then we want to instantiate our laser, and we will do so by making a reference to the projectile script. So we'll start by saying the projectile is in the script, give it a name, you can give it the same name, projectile, and that will equal an instantiated object, that is our laser, from the transform.position and transform.rotation of the player. Okay, so think back to the projectile script. We created that system.action of destroyed, that is an event that will happen upon the laser object being destroyed. As we said before, that can be listened out for by other scripts, and we want our player controller to listen out for that event. So, as we have made a reference to the projectile script, underneath we can punch in projectile.destroyed, that's the event. Once the player controller has detected that event, then we can determine what action we want the player controller script to make. And we will punch in plus equals destroy laser. Destroy laser is underneath. It is another method, so go ahead and create destroy laser. Once the laser has been destroyed, we are no longer reloading, so we want to set reloading back to false, just like so. And once we have fired a projectile, then we are in the process of reloading, therefore reloading equals true. So, to recap, once we fire a projectile, reloading will be true. While reloading is true, we cannot shoot again until reloading is false, which will happen upon the laser being destroyed, and in the projectile script, that projectile destroyed action being called. That's all good for our shoot method. Now let's give the player the ability to do so. In update, let's punch in an input, and we'll say if input.getKeyDown keycode.space or input.getMouseButtonDown 0, which is the left mouse button, then we can call upon our shooting. Excellent. So hit save. Let's head back into Unity. Now let's add the projectile script to our laser and alien laser prefabbed objects. In the prefabs folder, select the laser and open prefab. Underneath, let's add component, type in the name projectile and add it just like so. Now you'll see that we have the move direction on the X and the Y. We're not concerned about the X, but we do want to punch in a value on the Y. We want this laser to travel upwards, so we'll punch in a value of 1. As for speed, I found a value of 10 works just fine, but add your own value, make it your own, and we're also looking for that explosion game object. So if we were to select this and drag it in there like so, now we're all set up. Let's do the same for the alien laser, but this time the direction is going to be reversed. We're going to be wanting to travel down, so we'll punch in -1 on the Y, and again we want the same speed of 10 and that same explosion effect. So we'll punch that in there like so. Our projectiles are all set up. Let's head back into the scene. Let's select the player. As you can see, it is now looking for the laser projectile, so go ahead and drag your laser prefab in there like so. If you like, let's go ahead and test this out. In your scene, move around, shoot off some lasers, and you can see that when they collide with any object, they get destroyed, and we see a cool explosion effect. Also, you can see that when we shoot, reloading is true in the inspector. Let me show you one more thing. If I shoot off screen, you'll see that it collides with something at the top. That's because we have some boundaries, and all these are empty game objects with a box collider 2D at the top and bottom of the screen. So this will catch the alien lasers and the player lasers so they can be destroyed and not lost to the void of space. But as you saw, when we shoot the aliens, nothing happens to them. So let's go ahead and change that. Let's create a new script called Invader Controller and open it up. In the Invader Controller script, we'll set up all the variables that we're going to use now and later. So we just created the projectile. So like the player, we want a public game object for the laser. And when the alien is destroyed, let's add that explosion effect as well. So I have a public game object explosion. Eventually, we are going to cover point scoring. So when you kill an alien, it will score you some points. So we'll punch in a public integer for points, and we'll want to make reference to the score manager script called the scoreman, which we will create later. We also want to reference the invader movement script, because when we kill an alien, we want to subtract that alien from the total alien count in the invader movement script to determine whether or not we have been victorious. Okay, with the variables set, let's go ahead and create a private void awake. In here, we will make a reference to our invader movement, and as the invader movement script is on that parent object that the aliens are in, we can make a reference to it from the parent object. So we'll punch in manager, invader manager equals get component in parent, the invader movement script. There we go. Okay, next, let's go down to the bottom and create a private void on trigger enter 2D, collider 2D other. And like we've done in the past with collision objects, we'll create an if statement. And the if statement will say, if the other.gameObject.tag equals laser, referring to the player laser, then what do we want to happen? The alien will be destroyed and we'll instantiate that explosion effect at the position and the rotation of the alien. We also want to subtract that alien from the alien count. For when the alien count reaches 0, that's going to signal that we've been victorious and we can move on to the next wave of invaders. And we're not going to destroy the alien, we're going to set the alien object inactive. We're going to use those same 55 aliens in our scene. We're not going to create any more. So, with that out of the way, let's hit save and head back into Unity. Alright, now let's add the Invader Controller script to our alien prefab objects the same way we did with the lasers. Select any of your alien prefabs, open it up, and let's go to Add Component, search for the Invader Controller script, and let's fill in the necessary requirements. For the laser, we of course want the alien laser. For the explosion, that same explosion prefab that we used for the lasers. And you can leave score as 0. We'll cover that in more detail when we look at the score manager. Now, rather than repeat this process for the other alien objects, we can copy this component by clicking this gear icon here, you'll see that we can select copy component. Go to another alien object. In the animator, click the gear icon again, and you'll see we have paste component as new. Now we've added that same component complete with everything we need. Happy days. Do the same once again for the final alien. Select the gear icon, paste component as new, and there we go. Nice and simple. So with that all in place, let's hit play one last time. Now, when we shoot the aliens, they will be set inactive and an explosion will be instantiated in their place. That looks pretty cool. And if you look in the inspector there, every time we kill an alien, it is being subtracted from the alien count in the Space Invaders parent object. Happy days. All right. Thank you all very much for joining me today, guys. I appreciate you stopping by and checking out our latest Unity series. In the next video, we're going to cover shooting for the aliens because that's a little different to the player. So we'll look at that in more detail next time. Until then, have fun, take care, and I'll see you soon.